Hi, this is Alex, and I'm with Worship Leader magazine, and I'm here with my friend Andrew Peterson. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me here. And we're here at the 2018 National Worship Leaders Conference here in Nashville, Tennessee. And so I've got a few questions I wanted to run by Andrew, and so I sure appreciate him being here. So let's start with this. Andrew, the sort of slogan for this year's conference is, "This is my story, this is our song." So on first impression, what does that mean to you, that statement? This is my story, this is our song.
Let me think about that. Well, it excites me because storytelling is in my wheelhouse. Like the songs that have moved me the most, that have gotten my attention the most, are the ones that were stories. And so that's most of my career has been either trying to get inside of storytelling in songwriting or book writing, and I'm glad to hear the fact that there's like some sense of narrative that is a part of the theme, because I think story is what the language God wired our hearts to speak. And one of my favorite quotes that I don't even know who said was that if you want someone to know the truth, tell them. If you want someone to love the truth, tell them a story. And so the idea that, and I don't, this isn't me bashing anything, it's just objectively, when my career started, 20 years ago or whatever, it was like right when the Susan Ashtons and the Rich Mullins and the West Kings were kind of like on their way out.
Yeah.
And worship music exploded. Yeah. And we lost narrative. Like Christian radio wouldn't play story songs, testimonial songs that were kind of like about the grit of our lives, And so that's most of my career has been paying attention to that. So I like the fact that the theme seems to encompass this idea that story matters.
Well, that's when I saw you 2 years ago in Dallas, my wife and I absolutely captivated because you told stories between songs and within songs. It was just magnificent.
Thanks.
So, so speaking of story, can you tell me a story behind a song that you've written? It could be a new song or an older song, but tell me a story.
Well, let me think about that. I can tell you, wow, my mind just went completely blank, as if I'd never written a single song in my life. I'm thinking about songs on the current. Okay, I've got one. So on the new record, there's a song called "Maybe Next Year," and it was written after my very first visit to Israel, which was this past fall. So we were in the middle of making this album about the resurrection of Jesus, called Resurrection Letters, and I got this kind of last minute opportunity to go to Israel, and it was like during the block of studio time, and it was like, well, that would be dumb to pass up.
Sure.
Who knows if it'll inform the record. And so I went, and I grew up in the church. My dad's a preacher, and so was just around the Bible my whole life, and absorbed it without really wanting to or even knowing that I did. It was just kind of a part of the DNA of my childhood. And so stepping off the plane in Tel Aviv and taking a bus to the Sea of Galilee was like taking a bus to Narnia for me. It was like growing up reading stories and suddenly finding myself walking around inside of one. And so I mentioned the Wingfeather Saga, which is the series of books that I wrote, like trying to tell this big epic fantasy novel, like finding a way in the last book to tie up all the loose ends, to make the thing a satisfying conclusion is harder than you can possibly know until you've done it. Like I was like trying to spin 18 plates at once and trying to find a way to not stink. So when I went to Jerusalem on that trip, and I went to the Western Wall, the Wailing Wall they call it, and I didn't even know this until I got there, but that's Mount Moriah. The Jerusalem is Mount Moriah. And I remember I stopped the tour guide, I was like, wait, Mount Moriah as in like Abraham and Isaac Mount Moriah? And I never knew that where Abraham almost sacrificed Isaac and where the ram was caught in the thicket and the substitute was made is the same place where the temple ended up being built, more or less, which is where the priest would offer sacrifice, which is the same place where Jesus said, tear this temple down and I'll rebuild it on the third day. Is the same place where the curtain was torn at the crucifixion, is the same place where the sacrifice of Christ happened, is the same place where the resurrection happened. And so I was standing there And like from a storytelling standpoint,
Sure.
I wanted to fall on my face before the greatest storyteller you could imagine, who would like speak into being a universe and tell a story that would express the nature of his love, and interleave it all, and tie up, do all the foreshadowing, the prophecies, and all that kind of stuff, and everything comes to a sharp focus in the person of Jesus.
Wow.
And I just started bawling. And so anyway, when I got back home from that trip, I ended up writing this song called Maybe Next Year, about standing at the Western Wall and sensing the connection of all of those things. And it's called Maybe Next Year because of one of the things the Jews say at the end in a Passover meal is maybe next year in Jerusalem, as a way of saying maybe next year we'll get to go home. And so I appropriated it in my song. It's next year in the New Jerusalem.
That's magnificent. Thank you for sharing that with us. Well, let's finish with one question. In Romans 12:1, we're supposed to present our bodies as a living sacrifice. And then it says to live our lives and present our bodies as a living sacrifice, which is our reasonable act of worship. So what does that statement mean to you? What is our reasonable act of worship?
Well, I will steal an answer from somebody else because I had forgotten about that phrase, a reasonable act of worship, until there's an author named Leif Enger who wrote a book called Peace Like a River, which I think might be like the most perfect example of what a Christian novel ought to be. Mm-hmm. Beautiful, beautiful book. And he was speaking, and he said, he described his dog, and how his dog followed him everywhere he went. That when his dog was outside and he was inside, the dog would stand at the window. I have breakfast at Waffle House every Wednesday with a group of guys. Mm-hmm. And there's an old farmer who parks his pickup right outside the windows. And the dogs, he's got these beautiful golden retrievers that all sit on the tailgate of the car. And the entire time he's in that restaurant, they're watching him, waiting on him to come back out. Wow. And Leif Enger described that as a reasonable act of worship. It's delighting in your Maker, paying attention, not taking your eyes off of him, because that is the most reasonable thing a person can do.
Wow.
So,
wow.
It's not me, it's Leif Enger. Go read the book.
Well, listen, thank you so much for this bit of time together. It's so nice to connect with you, and thanks for being a part of our Songwriters in the Round presentation tonight. I'm so excited for these 800 worship leaders that are going to hear you and the others tonight. It'll just be great. So thank you.
Sure.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.